Have you ever wondered why no one truly knows who built Stonehenge? Or why? Why it aligns so precisely with the sun and stars, but holds no name, no script, no origin? Some believe it's a tomb, others a calendar, but a few quietly wonder, what if it was never meant for us at all? Welcome to Bedtime Tales, where stories drift between sleep and shadow. And tonight, we unravel one of Earth's oldest secrets. This is the ancient mystery of Stonehenge. No one remembers placing the stones, but they've always been there, older than memory, and just as unreachable. Some say they weren't built at all, but revealed, as if the earth exhaled and there they were, arranged, aligned, waiting. We measure their weight in tons, their height in meters, their alignment in degrees, but not one of those numbers explains why. Not one tells us who lifted them, or what they were meant to hold back. At first glance, Stonehenge seems quiet. A ring of cold gray monoliths standing alone on the windswept Salisbury Plain, surrounded by nothing but fields and silence. The sheep don't graze too close. Birds rarely nest near the lintels. And when the fog rolls in, thick, low, and gliding like breath over a sleeping giant, the stones feel aware. It looks simple, but Stonehenge is anything but. It's not a ring, but a complex, multi-phase monument, layers upon layers of construction spanning over 1,500 years. First came the ditches, then the upright stones, then the lintels forming a circle atop them. Each piece arranged with almost absurd precision, like someone was building a machine they couldn't fully describe. The stones are impossibly large. The heaviest among them weighs over 25 tons. They were transported from as far as Preseli Hills in Wales, nearly 150 miles away, a feat modern engineers would find challenging even today. And yet this was done over 4,500 years ago by people who had no known tools, no roads, and supposedly no written language. We know their dimensions, their composition, their alignment with the summer solstice sunrise and winter solstice sunset. But we don't know why. Why were they placed with such obsession? What were these ancient people tracking or calling? Legends cling to the stones like mist. Ancient druids chanting in circles. Astronomer priests mapping the skies. Some even say the monument was built by gods or giants, or perhaps something not quite of this earth. There are stories, quietly told, of a king named Aurelius who was said to have moved the stones from a far-off land with the help of the wizard Merlin, who called it the Giant's Dance. The idea of Merlin constructing Stonehenge may sound like myth. But strange things happen here. Compasses misbehave. Time seems to slow or shift. Some visitors leave feeling disoriented, unable to recall how long they stood there. Pilots flying above the plain have reported radio interference, small, persistent, unexplained. Drone footage often glitches. Some researchers believe the stones were placed not just for ceremonial purpose, but to interact with unseen energies. There are theories about ley lines, those supposed invisible veins of Earth's energy crisscrossing the globe. Stonehenge sits at the intersection of several. Could it be a conductor? A transmitter? Or something stranger, an ancient GPS system that points not to places, but to when? Archaeologists have found little beneath the surface. No great cities, no sacred texts. Just bones. Scattered, cremated remains. Burn offerings. And curious items buried deep, as though the living were trying to reach something below, or appease something watching above. We're told Stonehenge is a place of ancient ritual. But if it was built to honor the dead, why point it to the sky? And there's the sound, the hum. Always faint, always low, sometimes heard only in dreams. Some say it's just the wind. Others, more sensitive, say it's a frequency, a signal. Something waiting to be activated. What's most disturbing is how little the story has changed. The mystery has endured not just because we don't know the answer, but because no answer we've ever come up with has felt quite right. Every theory leaves something behind, like a stone missing from the circle. A silence too perfect to be accidental. For all our satellites and supercomputers, Stonehenge has outlasted empires. It has stood longer than our languages. It has survived the rise and fall of gods. And still, it keeps its secrets. Perhaps it is not meant to be understood, only witnessed. But that's only where the mystery begins. And if they weren't meant to be understood, then perhaps they were meant to be remembered. That's where the older stories begin, the ones passed down by word of mouth, long before pen met parchment. The ones that whisper not of architects or priests, but of giants. Not mythical in the fairy tale sense, but literal. Towering figures who shaped the earth before we even knew how to shape words. Before it was called Stonehenge, the site was known as something else entirely. In the early Welsh legends, it was the giant's dance, a phrase both poetic and strangely accurate. Not a monument, but a kind of ritual made solid. A motion frozen in time. The stones weren't erected. They were placed carefully, intentionally, as though by those who understood the rhythm of the world better than we ever could. One of the most enduring tales comes from Geoffrey of Monmouth, a 12th century cleric and chronicler. He claimed the stones were brought from Mount Killarowes in Ireland, where they had stood for centuries on a sacred hill. They were healing stones, he said, capable of curing sickness and extending life. But more importantly, they were not of this world. They had been arranged there by giants long ago, and it took Merlin's magic to move them. Merlin, the same Merlin whose name would later be woven into Arthurian legend. He wasn't just a wizard in Geoffrey's text. He was a keeper of forgotten knowledge, a translator of ancient memory. In the tale, Merlin orchestrates the removal of the stones, not through brute force, but through spells that allow the earth to release them, as if they had been anchored by something deeper than roots. Of course, mainstream historians dismiss this account. They call it myth, allegory. But the details are persistent. strangely precise. Why healing stones? Why giants? Why the need for magic to move them if they were simply blocks of granite? Across the globe, the echoes multiply. In Turkey's Göbekli Tepe, stone rings older than Stonehenge appear with similar mysterious alignments. In Baalbek, Lebanon, massive stones weighing hundreds of tons lie stacked as if by hands that did not strain. The Olmecs carved heads that stand taller than most men. The Easter Island Moai gaze inland, as if remembering something. In every case, the scale dwarfs logic. And always, hidden in myth or carved in stone, giants. In the Book of Enoch, forbidden from most canons, the Nephilim are described, children of angels and humans, giants who walked the earth and shared forbidden knowledge with mankind. In Greek lore, it's the Titans, beings of immense power buried beneath the mountains they once roamed. In Norse stories, Jotnar shaped the world alongside the gods, only to be cast aside when the New Age began. Some call these tales allegory. Others think they're fragments, memories encoded as myth, preserved just long enough to whisper across the ages. Even today, strange evidence lingers. Enormous bone fragments unearthed and quickly hidden in archives. Cave paintings depicting beings with elongated limbs and strange helmets. Archaeological sites with tools too large to hold. Mainstream science explains these as anomalies. But what if they aren't? What if giants weren't metaphors, but ancestors? Or visitors? Because if they walked here once, creatures of immense scale and knowledge, then perhaps Stonehenge wasn't just built by them. Maybe it was built for them. A kind of beacon, a temple, or the docking point. And if they disappeared, as the legends say, was it by force or design? Some stories suggest the giants fled, others that they fell. Perhaps their time passed. Perhaps they slumber beneath us still, beneath chalk and stone, waiting. Or perhaps they never left at all. The stones of Stonehenge are not carved with names or symbols. But maybe that's the point. Language wasn't necessary, not for the ones who spoke in vibration and frequency, who shaped worlds, not just words. If the myth is true, if the circle really began as a ring of giants dancing under a different sky, then our ancestors didn't build Stonehenge to remember something they understood. They built it to preserve something they didn't. And if Stonehenge was made by them, then we must ask not who the giants were, but what they were building for. And if Stonehenge was made for giants, what were the giants building for? That's the deeper layer, the one the old myths never quite answer. Because even if they shaped the stones, even if they once walked these hills, the monument doesn't point to them. It points away, upward, outward. What if the monument wasn't built to honor them, but to serve something they followed? Perhaps it was never just a ring of stone, but a tool, a system, something built to track, or signal, or synchronize. For centuries, Stonehenge has been called many things. A temple, a graveyard, a gathering place for rituals lost to time. But a growing number of researchers now propose something stranger, that the circle is not a monument at all. It's a machine, not designed to hold worship, but to measure time, space, or something else entirely. It begins, as it often does, with the sky. On the summer solstice, the sun rises directly behind the heel stone, casting its light into the center of the monument like a golden needle through the fabric of the earth. On the winter solstice, the sunset sinks perfectly between the towering trilithons, as if the stones were placed to catch the dying light of the year. These are not coincidences. They are calculations. The layout of Stonehenge reveals a solar calendar, not symbolic, but functional. In 2020, researchers proposed that the outer ring, composed of 30 upright sarsen stones, represented a 365.25-day year, remarkably close to our modern calendar. This prehistoric timepiece could have tracked seasons, solstices, eclipses, even planting and harvesting cycles. Survival disguised as sacred geometry. And that's just what lies above the surface. Below ground, the mystery deepens. Recent LiDAR scans and ground-penetrating radar have revealed an enormous subterranean complex beneath and around the henge, hollowed pits, massive ditches, and a second circular formation of buried stones, Dainton walls, nearly 2 miles away. Many of these align with lunar cycles or other ancient monuments. Some trace invisible ley lines, running straight for miles, as if connecting something or conducting it. Are these just chance alignments? Or were our ancestors mapping not geography, but geometry? Not the land, but the sky? This leads to one of the more persistent theories, that Stonehenge is part of a planetary grid, a global matrix of ancient sites placed with uncanny precision. From the Great Pyramids to Easter Island, from Machu Picchu to Göbekli Tepe, monuments appear to fall on geodetic lines, great circles wrapping around the earth like threads in a cosmic loom. Some call them energy pathways. Others call them coincidence. But the map is there all the same. And at Stonehenge, strange things are still happening. Dowsers have long claimed the energies here are strongest at dawn and dusk. Visitors report nausea. Batteries drain without warning. Electronic devices behave erratically. Even skeptics admit the magnetic field in the area is abnormal. Which brings us to sound. One lesser-known feature of Stonehenge is its acoustic properties. Some researchers believe the site was designed to channel sound, creating low-frequency standing waves between the stones. Not music, not speech, something deeper. These resonances might have induced trance-like states in those who entered. Or perhaps it was meant to transmit something beyond human hearing. Could it be that Stonehenge wasn't just built to observe the sky, but to speak to it? That theory leads us into far stranger territory. In the 1960s, astronomer Gerald Hawkins used early computer models to study the stone alignments. He found more than 165 astronomical correlations, and proposed that Stonehenge functioned as a Neolithic computer capable of predicting solar and lunar eclipses. He was mocked at first, but later reviews showed his math held up. And then the stories, not from scientists, but from military personnel. Declassified British reports from the Cold War mention aerial anomalies near the Henge, triangular lights in the fog, unexplained temperature spikes, radio blackouts. Strange details, easy to ignore, until you realize the same signatures appeared in Rendlesham Forest in 1980, less than 100 miles away. Some researchers now believe Stonehenge may be a beacon, a receiver, or a transmitter. One theory claims that during solar maximum, the site begins to emit subtle electromagnetic pulses, rising from its center like breath. Rhythmic, repeating, like a heartbeat or a countdown. Of course, none of this is proven. Perhaps it never will be. But the question still lingers like the mist on Salisbury Plain. Why this place, so meticulously built and obsessively preserved? Why a circle, unless it was meant to repeat something? Maybe Stonehenge was never a place of worship. Maybe it was never meant for us at all. And still, something feels missing. The calendar works. The alignments are exact. The geometry is deliberate. But it's as if one piece, just one, hasn't revealed itself. Something hidden, or taken, or waiting. Because if Stonehenge truly is a device, then what exactly is it counting down to? That's the question they never stopped asking. The astronomers, the dowsers, the mystics with their magnetometers, and the physicists who said they weren't mystics at all. If Stonehenge was a machine, calibrated to the sky, humming with resonance, embedded with celestial alignments, then what was its function? What was it waiting for? The answer might lie not in the stars, but in the ground beneath it. Because long before the stones were raised, long before anyone thought to follow the sun across the horizon, something else had already begun at that very spot. Burials. Cremated remains. Carefully placed. Interred in a perfect ring of 56 shallow pits now called the Aubrey Holes. For years, they were thought to be symbolic. An early foundation, perhaps, or discarded measurements for later construction. But they weren't placeholders. They were final resting places. Over 60 individuals, and likely many more, were laid to rest within those holes, centuries before the first great sarsen was dragged across the plain. The carbon dating confirmed it. The DNA confirmed something stranger still. These weren't local people. Many came from distant regions. Some from the western coast of Wales, where the blue stones were quarried. Their diets, their bone chemistry, everything pointed to intentional migration. They hadn't stumbled into Stonehenge. They had been brought there. That's when the idea of the countdown began to change. Because what if Stonehenge wasn't tracking a moment in time, but a process? What if it wasn't waiting for something to arrive, but for something to become? In the ancient world, death was not an end. It was a shift, a passage. a transition between forms. And Stonehenge, some believe, was built as the engine of that transition. The layout of the burials wasn't random. The cremations were spaced precisely, forming a circle that echoes the geometry of the later monument. Between each set of bones, tools were found, carved flint picks, antler fragments, and in one case, a gold lozenge with a symmetry so perfect it matched modern-day golden ratio spirals. Were they tokens? Codes? It gets stranger. Geophysical scans revealed magnetic anomalies, concentrated pulses just beneath certain stones, especially stone 16. Which seemed to register subtle fluctuations during the solstices. In 1997, researchers detected a low-frequency hum beneath the ground, barely perceptible, but repeating. It wasn't seismic. It wasn't atmospheric. It came from the site itself. Some called it nonsense. Others called it a heartbeat. But what if the heartbeat isn't metaphorical? What if the buried dead, the ring of ashes and tools and cosmic precision, weren't symbolic at all, but part of the mechanism? That theory gained momentum with the rediscovery of the so-called black core stone, unearthed beneath the central altar. Smooth, heat-scarred. Not native to the region. No one knows how it got there, or why it was buried so deep beneath the heart of the circle. Some said it was a mistake. Others said it was the first piece, older than the stones, older than the bones, maybe older than the memory of the place itself. A seed, an anchor, a power source. And if that's true, if the machine was built around a buried core, fueled by geometry, magnetism, and the remains of the dead, then maybe the countdown isn't counting toward an event, but a reaction, a culmination of energy, a synchronization, a switch being slowly flipped over thousands of years, solstice by solstice, burial by burial. So maybe it was never about the sky at all. Maybe the sky was just the clock. And the answer was always under our feet. But what if the question was never meant to be answered at all? For centuries, Stonehenge has stood as a question carved in stone, one that time refuses to erode. The grass changes. The roads nearby grow wider. The visitors keep coming. But the monument remains silent. Not empty, just silent. In the 1800s, farmers claimed their livestock would grow restless on solstice mornings, backing away from the henge even before dawn. In the 1960s, surveyors using metal detectors along the outer ditch found short-lived pulses in the soil, electrical flickers that vanished as quickly as they came. Instruments recorded nothing, but they felt it. A tingle in the skin, a kind of hum in the bones. And today, in the age of satellites and simulations, we're still no closer to solving it. LiDAR scans have revealed underground features miles from the circle, long-forgotten pathways, burial mounds, and mysterious parallel ditches that connect to nowhere. Some believe these are the remnants of a vast ritual complex, one that once stretched for dozens of miles, a kind of open-air circuitry wired into the land itself. Even AI simulations, fed with every measurable metric of the site, angles, acoustics, lunar positions, burial dates, can't produce a single unifying model that explains it all. It's almost as if it's built to resist definition, like the stones want to be remembered, but not understood. And yet we can't help ourselves. Every generation rediscovers Stonehenge with new eyes. Some see a calendar, others a machine. Some whisper about portals or stargates or relics of a forgotten civilization. Some are drawn here in silence, not by logic, but by instinct, as if something old still pulls at them. We call it superstition. But even today, scientists quietly admit that the magnetic anomalies are real. The electronic interference is real. The resonance frequencies, the strange heat patterns, the stone echoes that spiral between trilithons, all of it real. But still, no answers. Just patterns, echoes, repetition. And maybe that's the point, because whatever Stonehenge once was a device, a calendar, a tomb, a temple, a warning, it didn't end when the stones were placed. It didn't stop when the burials ceased, or when the black core was buried, or when the sky no longer aligned as cleanly as it once did. Maybe it's still happening. Slowly, quietly. Every winter and summer solstice, people gather to watch the sunrise or sunset split the horizon in perfect golden symmetry. They cheer. They take photos. But they don't notice the shiver that runs through the grass, or the birds falling strangely quiet, or the soft, low-frequency pulse that seems to roll outward from the heart of the henge, like a breath held for thousands of years. Some say Stonehenge is a monument to death. Others say it was built for the stars. But maybe it was built for us. Not for who we were, but for who we would become. And maybe it's still waiting for the final variable to align, waiting for the last switch to flip, waiting for us to notice something we've missed all along, something beneath the monument, something placed long ago. They called it the black stone, smooth, heat-scarred, non-native. Relic, they thought. A mistake. But what if it wasn't buried? What if it was planted? A seed. A signal. A countdown that only begins once we've built just enough to hear it. Because when you listen closely, when the wind dies and the stones stand shadowed against the dawn, you might hear it. Not a whisper, not a voice, but something else entirely. A message, not meant to be read, but felt, buried in stone, etched in silence, meant for no one and everyone. Not a monument, not a mystery, a reminder that long before we built cities, long before we charted stars, someone or something was already watching, and it left a circle in the middle of an empty plain, where time folds in on itself, and memory hums like stone. Not the end of a story, not the beginning of one either, just the part where you realize it never stopped.